Hi everybody, today we look what to do with our landscapes that we created in the series before. So what we want to achieve, a kind of Blender rendering of a landscape like that. Really our landscape in a kind of granite socket and being rendered and all shiny and shadows. And how to do that, let's see. There's an easy way, just using the templates. That will be the first thing that we do. So we go here to the developer Bastian Tech website, we go here to Blender 3D map, and we can simply just download the whole project, all the textures, the Blender project and so on. You just can download it and reuse it. That might be the easiest way really. So let's open the zip file, it's 200 megabytes or so, and put it somewhere. So extending it here. And here I also copied a texture and a height map from an older project that is actually also on the Google Drive, so you can use that again. Good, yeah, what we get here is exactly what you saw in the video. So that's a kind of socket with a landscape. We are displacement map. It's actually, the geometry is super simple. It's just a cube, nothing more. And now the question is, how can we put in our own displacement maps and own texture? So you go to the cube, you go to the modifiers, and you see the display modifier. Yeah, and the display modifier just really needs a height map, and you just feed it your new height map, and it will kind of immediately get flat, at least. The strength is not enough, we will correct that later. But for the moment it's fine, it has now the new height map on it. The second thing is of course the texture that we want to change. So here in the texture tab or the material tab, you see two materials. One is the granite material from the outside box, and the other one is the landscape itself. And the landscape itself is really a very, very primitive material. There's definitely something where you could invest a bit more time thinking about reflections and stuff. For water, for example, but it's an image texture. So if I want to open that, I can very easily just load my new texture here. And then immediately you have this kind of, should be a winter crater-like landscape. Okay, the one thing, it's a bit flat. That is mostly really the strength of the displacement. The mid-level should be around 0. It depends heavily on your landscape. And the strength should be, yeah, depending, normally in the 40, 50s, but it can go up to 100 depending if your height map is really, yeah, taking the whole bandwidth or not of the grayscale. And yeah, 120 kind of looks okayish, maybe a bit more even. So yeah, that looks good. It should be, it was supposed to be a kind of crater winter landscape. And yeah, the one thing important is the mid-level. You have to play around with it really. The higher it gets, the deeper actually your landscape goes down. Well, something like that should work, I guess. So that would be the replacement of both things. You actually also have an animation here in the demo project, so you can very easily generate a kind of video out of it, looking from each side. Big question is, of course, how to do it ourselves. We saw the two materials that we need. We will need a couple of vertex groups because it's just one cube, not different geometries. So we have to define what goes where. We need, of course, this displacement for the height map, and we light the whole thing with HDRI lighting. And well, that's it more or less. Yeah. Big question is, how do we do it? Starting is here simply with the cube. I actually put all the steps exactly like we do it here into that web page, so we really go through it from top to down, and you can combine it with the video. It should make it easy. So I start a project. I'm on Blender 4.1 at the moment, and yeah, let's make it a bit bigger, our socket. Let's make it 10 by 10 by 2, let's say. And that is my base socket to use. Now I want to subdivide because I need a bit more points to work with. So I go to edit mode. Now I want to select only the top side of the cube. Here I change the selection mode into face select. So now I click, if I click here, for example, on the top, let's put it on the top here, that's the C axis from top down, it will select only the C axis, only the C top here, nothing else. Right clicking, subdivide, and here the menu, I can subdivide it max into 100 pieces. I will do a second round of subdividing. Again, right click, subdivide, maybe 3 or 4. Be very careful here. If you make that too high, your Blender will freeze and crash. But we need as many points as possible, but it gets slower and slower with time, so be careful here with it. Now we have subdivided everything on top. Now we want to kind of decrease that selection a bit because I want to have this rim here. Yeah, so to have that socket rim. I could go to select more and less, and select less. That would make it a bit smaller, or I just can do a Control minus on your numpad, that has the same effect really. Now it looks good. It's really just this middle that is selected, all the subdivisions here, and I want to save that. I go to data here and I need two vertex groups, one for this landscape that is selected at the moment and one for everything else. That is my granite socket if you want. So let's create two of these groups. The one I call landscape vertices and the other one should be then, let's say socket vertices. Socket vertices. And yeah, this is where we really want to put our textures in, different one of course for each. So effect is really that we can store these vertex selections and everything we do is then assigned to only these selections. So for landscape, I assign it to the currently selected one. And for the socket, I want to assign it to everything else. So how to select everything? Yeah, you could go, you try with the mouse, that's normally not working. So go to select and all, or just press A actually for all. And then everything is selected. Now I don't need the landscape vertices. So that is something I can actually deselect from here and everything else stays as it is. And that is what I then assign to the socket vertices. So now if I press select, I have only the socket or only the landscape and I can start working with it. Materials, I need two of them. I need one for the socket, that's kind of granite, and the other one of course is my landscape, that is a simpler one. For granite, I actually went to Polyhaven, downloaded one of the very good textures here, and let's think about how to actually use that. Two materials are needed, one for socket, one for landscape asset. So let's go down to the material tab. One standard material is always there if you start a new project. So let's go to shading and look at this one. That's a very primitive one. It really has just a base color and a material output. And instead of that base color, we want to start adding, of course, an image texture. So Shift A, then image texture. And the texture should then be our newly imported Polyhaven texture that comes with a zip file. So diffusion is then normally the kind of standard color texture that we have. So let's put it here in the base color and that looks already good. Now we have a bit more what we can do. For example, roughness. So the way reflection works. So again, I copy past actually this image texture, put the roughness texture into it, and again the color goes to roughness. What we also have are normal maps, so the direction of each point on the map. Same thing, I need a texture color, image texture, sorry. Then I select the normal, but this one I actually have to put into a normal map first. So I take the color from the image texture, search for the color in of a normal map, that's down here, and then I can plug that into the normal of the material BSDF. Displacement, kind of similar. So I have a displacement texture coming from Polyhaven. I select that. Then I need a displacement map and the color goes into the height of the displacement map. Where's the height? Here's the height. And that one then goes to the final displacement of the material, making the surface a bit rougher and 3D structured. What I also need is a couple of texture coordinates. So looking Shift A for texture coordinate, that is the node. And here I will take the UV and put that into a mapping node to get a vector. So I look for mapping here. I put that UV into the vector. So UV out to vector in, and the vector out I take and put it in all the vectors of the textures that I imported to make them behaving the same depending on rotation and scaling and shifting around and so on and so on. Good, looks good. That's my still quite primitive material, but more than enough for these things. I see the stretching problems here at the bottom, so I have to do something around that. Do later. First things first, let's rename it to mSocket, so material for socket. And now I need another material going for my landscape. So with the plus I get a new one, opening it, that's still the kind of same primitive one. Shift A gives me an image texture node, or I just go do a Control V in my case here. Then I select my final texture that comes from Gaia. That was the result of the texturing from the last video. Or you take one from the website here directly, from the Google Drive. I have 4 or 5 examples here that you could take. And I plug it in, that's already it. So we keep it very simple. Definitely something you could improve, like rivers being shiny and so on and so on. But yeah, for the moment that should be fine enough. Good. We have the textures. Now we have to think about how to assign them to the different parts of the cube. Because yeah, it's all really looks okay-ish with the socket, but definitely the landscape is missing and the socket has some problems with stretching. So let's see. First thing, let's rename it to keep it clean. Now we have M socket and M landscape. Now we think about displacement first actually. So displacement means, yeah, I have a gray map, and that gray map defines the height of certain nodes, and that is reflected here. So it should of course go here to the top. So maybe to make it a bit simpler, I actually select the vertex groups of my landscape, and that is where the displacement map should go, and of course the surface texture should go. So let's look at this here, where I have of course the landscape texture, and I assign it here to the selected vertices, and you see it's already there. Does not look perfectly well because obviously the river runs through the map, so we need some stretching again to solve. And I'm reassigning to all other vertices, the socket vertices, this M socket, so that I'm clear here. Okay, looking okayish. Let's go for the next step. The height map is a texture again, and that modifies a displacement. So I go to modifiers, I look for displace, and here I feed in the height map that I want to use. So here I can either press new to get a new texture, or I can go directly down to the top of the textures, create one here, doesn't matter. Same thing, you see here the texture, and it eats an image or movie, and I will give it the height map that was again exported out of Gaia. And another thing is, of course, I don't want to influence it the full cube. I only want to influence it the landscape vertices, nothing else. So here in the modifier, I go here to the vertices and tell them only please landscape vertices. Everything should be ignored, so I can really add modifiers to parts of my geometry, and that is very powerful actually. You should use that. You should use that quite a lot. Okay, now it's about strength and mid-level. Mid-level normally should be around 0. So make sure you are not in edit but object mode, otherwise you will not see that. And yeah, then you have to play around really. Mid-level maybe a bit above 0, 0.02 or something. That is something you have to look really because it depends on your height map. And the strength 50 to 100, really again depending a bit. You have to play around what looks natural to your height map here. Yeah, okayish I would say, maybe a bit going down here, meaning being bigger. The bigger it gets, the more it gets down. And yeah, I think that's fine enough. Okay, now obviously my rivers and so are not really something that should run over the mountain, and my snow is missing. So obviously I have some issues here with stretching, with UV stretching. UV stretching, that is something that my texture is not set like I would like it. There's a full submenu for it for UV editing in Blender, and that is exactly what we will use. So let's go here to the UV editing bar, and yeah, it will actually show where your texture resides if you select it. So let's select it first. We have these two textures, the socket and the landscape, and we have the vertex groups. So let's select the landscape vertex groups, and you see here the black, that are actually the points that are selected. So obviously only a very small part of the landscape. So I could do that here manually, and we will have to do it later, but here I can just click right, then UV unwrap and smart UV project. That will, if you press OK, that will just put it to the whole picture, and in this case it's actually exactly what we want. So that is already looking fine, and if we check that, then we should really see the landscape stretching exactly like we need it. As I say, never in edit mode, that is just flat, but in object mode you should see it. And if you now put it here into the render mode, you see rivers is actually starting in the mountains and the snow is on the top of the mountain. So yeah, very good. Okay, looking good. I would say next thing that we would have to think about is the sides. The sides of the granite socket are stretched and not looking that well. And if you click on one of them, then you see obviously, yeah, that is not really how it should like. It should be not a quadrant. It should be kind of reflecting the geometry of the side. If I try to do it as a smart project, again, it just takes everything. That's still not solving the problem. So meaning I use these tools here to stretch it accordingly. In our case here with the socket, that does not need to be totally exact. If you, of course, are more fine-grained texturing, you have to be exact here. But other than that, I just select all the sides, go here to the texture, press A for all, selecting all of the selection here, of the texture selection, and then I stretch it roughly into a size that would fit, and that is more than enough for the socket to be not looking stretched anymore, and that's it already. Okay, so that should be repaired. The top side and the down side were actually fine. So yeah, from a texture point of view, I think we should be done. Let's go to layout, look at it. Okay, a bit hard to look at it simply because the lighting is not that great. We have this point light that comes with the standard scene. That is something we want to also change. So let's do HDRI. That's kind of the easy thing. So we go to the world tab and we will set the color to an environment texture. Magenta means that it does not find the texture. Yeah, we did not select anything. So let's open one. And again, coming from the Polyhaven, we will use one of the HDRI textures here, a kind of cloudy sky that I had here, and just open that image, and immediately you will have a kind of lighting in the scene. That is, yeah, quite okay. It's a bit bright, so you have to adjust between the HDRI lighting that we have and the light itself that is already or still in the texture, and make sure that you balance that accordingly. We leave the light in because we want to change it here to a sun. Okay, not such a bright sun, but a smaller sun, simply to get shadows. Yeah, if you have some shadows in your landscape, that looks much more natural, and you improve the 3D effect actually that you have here in landscape. So that is something you want to try out. And then you can just grab here this small mini sun, the yellow one, and drag it around, and you will see the shadows acting accordingly. You can also animate that to have a kind of day-long thing going on there. So that is how it gets more and more realistic, and I think it's actually looking already quite good. So yeah, we have our cube, we have our granite socket. Might need some beveling on the edges, looks a bit sharp, but other than that, we have the displacement and landscape, and the textures are working nicely. How to render it? Yeah, I take my camera here that comes with the standard scene. I position the whole thing like I like it, and then I will put the camera to reflect exactly the viewport view. I can do that with view, align active camera to view, or I press Ctrl Alt and numlock 0. Both things work. And then you see exactly what your camera angle would be. It's kind of mirror camera. So what you need to do is looking through the camera, either press num 0 or go view camera as active camera, and then you manipulate the focal length. And here I need it to lower to make the section being larger. And yeah, that might be something that I can work with. So if I now render something, it will take the current camera and render exactly that view. Or I use an animation and tell it to use an animation to render hundreds of views really. And then I put that together into a video. Actually, Blender nowadays does that for me. And I get then a nice video to kind of showcase the whole thing. That is all actually in the Blender file that you can download already. So that animation is there. You just really have to use it with your own texture. That's the result. I think it looks actually quite good for the effort and the speed it can be produced. I hope, as always, that helps, and see you soon. Bye.